now. Another live episode of Hidden Horsepower. You can check out all the episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, all of that, TotalSeal.com website. Warren Johnson, the professor of pro stock, 97 wins, 6 championships, 6 indies, and a book that is already in its 2nd printing and a bestseller on Amazon's automotive history section. WJ, welcome back. How are you?
I'm just fine. More importantly, how are you?
I am tired.
Well, that's a good thing.
My brain has been absorbing all this information all day long.
Actually worked today?
I sat and I listened and I absorbed. I absorbed information from some of the best out here at the Engine Performance Expo. But the information makes me want to do something. I want to put it to use. That's something you've done your entire life. Put information to good use.
As they say, get her done.
Get her done.
Well, he is the king of the one-liners and the sayings.
Yeah.
Right? We even immortalized it from last year. He had the line, you can't tune it up if you blew it up.
Yep.
So we immortalized you this year in the commemorative Engine Performance Expo t-shirt. Hope you don't mind me taking a license to steal that from you.
Not a problem.
We'll give you one. Right.
Exactly. And you know what? Another one just happened on a recent episode. We had one of your former crew members, employees, Gary Stennett, on the show, and we were talking about machining. And he said, when talking about the modern technology, he said, Warren told me you can be a machine operator or you can be a machinist. And he was talking about the feel and the sound and all of that, personal connection to the machine and what it was doing and the best way to get a finish. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, I always look at it. A real machinist can take a bad machine and build perfect parts. A machine operator can take a perfect machine and build bad parts. And that's the difference between a machinist and a machine operator.
And there's your shirt for you.
Exactly. I think the same thing. Yeah. New shirt. So there you go.
Right. So you've been in the news lately. The book comes out. It was we promoted it at the last Engine Performance Expo, and it took a little bit longer to get to print, but then it got to print, and it flew off the shelves, and it's already in its 2nd printing, which is rare, but people want to know about Warren Johnson. What was that like for you?
Well, I've seen a lot of the responses. Well, the only ones they show me are the positive ones. I haven't seen the negative ones. But it was different. I never felt that I was worthy of a book at this point in time yet. I really haven't done all that much. I raced a car for a living, and that's basically what I did. I raced for a living instead of going out there and trying to make a name for myself. So I figure you don't need to put the cart before the horse is the way I've always looked at it. If you do a good job, people will notice, things will go the right direction.
Well, I highly recommend everybody out there get it. You can get it on Amazon.com. There's a lot of nuggets and storylines. And for me, as a fan, and you know that, fan of you and Kurt for many years before I started working in the industry, so this is kind of a big deal for me always, and bust my chops from time to time. But I love it. But for me, the best parts were, young Warren. Building walls of snow so that you had an engine room that you could build engines in, and it's 30 below. That was alien to me, being from Florida. You did whatever you had to do to pursue what you wanted to pursue, and that's what makes it a big deal.
That's basically called survival. My brother and I, we'd take a lot of mechanical work on in the wintertime, and didn't have a shop that big to put anything in, so we had to work outside. So you just walled off vehicles with snow and crawled underneath them and overhauled engines, did whatever you needed to do. Besides, we cut pulpwood, trapped weasels and animals and whatnot. You just did whatever it took to have some economic benefit from it.
Sitting in a welding chair in 30 below, welding
sling
making
welding structural steel.
Not enough money to live the life you wanted to live, but you did it, and you were doing it.
Back then, it was a whole $1.39 an hour. People can't even imagine working for that wage. But my wife and she worked. I worked. Went and bought a brand new Camaro, turned it into a pro stock car. You did whatever you needed to do. You didn't wait for the government to give you a handout.
And that's the lesson and that's why they wrote a book about you. That's the reason, right, is that you came from hardworking, humble beginnings, but ended up as the professor of pro stock, a person who is, at least within an industry, famous and revered.
Well, I'll put it this way. I guarantee you that same dedication he put into building walls of snow so you could do machine work, you did that into building engines.
Well, because I enjoy anything mechanical, and building of the engine is the simplest part of it. Thinking your way through the process of what you're trying to accomplish and how you're going to accomplish it. Mm-hmm. That's the interesting part, and the part that I actually enjoyed.
Well, and let's not to give away the Gary Stinnett Hidden Horsepower coming up on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, but he gave you credit for that as well, and some other folks he worked with. It's not what to think about, it's how to think about. That was the ultimate lesson that enabled him to continue his career, and I'd like to try to illuminate on that a little bit, like how to think. There are people who are in their shops right now or watching this in the future. How to solve a problem is not about what it is, it's a method of how to think about the solution. Can you go there?
First and foremost, Newtonian physics is not going to change in our lifetime.
The rules of the universe are set.
Yep, they're set. God set them, and they're
done.
There for life. You really have to understand a problem before you can solve it. Most of them are really not that difficult. People think themselves into non-functional situations, and you look at something, it's really not that difficult. I got to go from there to there. The easiest thing is a straight line. Got a few obstacles in between. Well, you just get rid of them.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Well, it's that applying yourself, right? I think that's what you're saying, is that you have to think about that bigger picture, not just, there's an obstacle, I'm done, or maybe a convoluted way around the obstacle.
But the biggest part of success is that you have to accept failure on the way. But if you look at, say you got 10 processes you're going to go through to do whatever. If you succeed at one, you got 9 failures. Pure math and instinct would say you better learn from the failures than from the one good part.
Yeah, there you go. That's back to the Edison thing we mentioned earlier. It's that you learn from all those failures.
You have to learn from everything.
And you can't be afraid to try something.
Oh, you can't be afraid to fail. I mean, failure is just a part of life.
Right.
Nobody's going to be perfect 100% of the time. Nobody hits a home run every time.
Well, true, right? I mean, even Barry Bonds and those guys, they still miss the ball every once in a while. Yeah. Well, I think part of that makes me kind of think about today's age, where people expect things to be perfect out of the box. You do something new, you expect it to be spot on. And what I'm hearing you say is that's really a not realistic expectation.
Well, first of all, you have to define perfect. Mm-hmm. Perfect is only the amount of error you're willing to accept.
Ooh, that's another good one.
Okay, somebody writing this stuff down?
Right, somebody recording this or something?
He's coming up with a gold, and we got to be jotting it down. Fortunately, it will be archived forever. Let's go back to that Camaro, and I don't want to talk so much about it, but the DRCE competition engine, Chevrolet, Oldsmobile, all of that, but you started out with just a factory car that you went and bought and modified it, and that was, from what I learned, the bridge. Like without that car, the Warren we know doesn't emerge. Carrying around on a flatbed like a tow truck.
Everybody's got to start someplace. Nowadays, you got a lot of wherewithal that your parents, grandparents give you, so they put them in a driver's seat, expect them to be a pro stock racer just because they got enough money. That doesn't make them a racer. And there's a difference between a racer and a driver. A racer will do everything it takes to get to race. A driver just combs their hair and whatever and gets in the driver's seat every 6 seconds. It's just, things are different nowadays. I'm not saying it's any better, any worse. It's just different.
It's different. Well, the modern technology, the things have been created now that didn't even exist back then. But boy, I bet some of them would have helped you back then. If there was modern technology of today available then, like what would you have liked to have access to? Like machines, like we're talking about, tire technology. There's so many different things that have evolved and advanced over the years.
Well, I guess you could just say that the calculator is definitely faster than a slide rule.
Yes.
And that's, you know, but you really should understand a slide rule before you just assume hitting buttons is going to give you the correct answer.
Right.
You know, it's like when you read a book, the first thing you do is find out what the author is all about. Because if somebody's got time to write a book, that means they're probably unemployed for some reason.
Except when it was your book, because I know
Yeah,
Kelly.
I didn't
write
visit
it.
Kelly, right?
I know Kelly. Yeah, Kelly's got like 6 very, very hard, difficult, challenging jobs.
I would say she was probably the best person to pick to write that book because A, she loves pro stock. I've known her for quite a bit of the time, and I'd have to say she was the best person to do the dirty work, shall we say.
And probably mortified that we're speaking about her because she just loves to play the back. But since we are, though, like, what a great job she did. And yes, is there anyone that loves pro stock more than Kelly Wade?
Not from the literary side of it. She absolutely, I think that's her favorite category. You know,
By a
I've
long
seen her
shot.
over last, 10 plus years, and she's always come around, always has a great personality, and always interested in what we're doing.
And the process, you know, you, Arlene, Kurt, like she was with you. She became part of the family.
Yeah.
Going to, you go to the same restaurant every day for dinner, except for Sunday or one day a week. The 7th day,
Tuesday, Mexican.
The 7th day, where you go to Mexican, right? Creature of habit.
To a certain extent,
Excellent.
but I like to eat good.
And we don't want to say where it is because we don't want you to lose
Can't
your
have any spoilers, no.
table or anything like that. But just giving up your life to someone, you have to trust them. You have to trust that they're going to do something right. And you guys broke out photographs, and Arlene had documented so much. Did you know that she had all of that?
Yeah, I guess in the back of my mind I knew she had all of that, and I have to give her credit for saving all that, because that's what made the book, it made it more of a personal picture of my life, where they could see where I came from, how I evolved to what I was and what I am, and so it gives me a pretty good history of myself, and Arlene and Kurt too.
Young Warren was pretty cool too. You guys hanging out, like it wasn't. I don't want to say this the wrong way, but the professor was a different image than what I saw with young Warren out on the tour, kind of spending some time, saw some lawn chairs out there in the pits. Kind of a different era of drag racing, though.
You must have read a different part of the book that I did.
I was looking into those photographs, man. It looked like you were having a really good time.
Oh, I enjoy life. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we only get one trip at this deal, so you better enjoy it.
Yes.
I still think he would like to have had one of these EM69s in the 80s or 70s.
Oh, yeah, I'd probably be up 7 or 8 inches taller. It's wore me down to this.
You were 6 foot back in the day, right?
Absolutely. My story.
All right, so you're also in the news because one of your proteges, Greg Anderson, just got 98 wins, and you've had 97 wins. You've told us in the past that, and he's told us, that you guys are connected in many ways. Like, he doesn't get 98 wins without working for Warren Johnson, and he was part of your 200 mile per hour run. What has that been like to kind of like watch it happen and see his competition like really fight him for it? It took a long time, 2/3 of the season, but he finally got there.
Well, I'm glad he finally got there, because he's spent 20 years trying to achieve that, and it took him 165 races to get 97 wins. I did it in 151 races. It's just a different way of doing things. I came from a different era of racing as opposed to what it is nowadays. I'm not saying one is better or worse than the other one. It's just that it's different, and Greg got to be proud of getting 98 wins.
Well, you've got a great heritage. I mean, a guy like Greg that worked for you, a guy like Gary that worked for you. You look at that's what in the pro football they call it the coaching tree.
Yes.
All the guys that work for Bill Walsh. I mean, those guys revolutionized the NFL. So Bill had his Super Bowls, but then all of his proteges have other Super Bowls and stuff. So you got to be proud of they obviously learned something from you along the way.
Well, in a lot of cases, they learned what not to do. But that was part of the education.
Right.
Right. They took what I had done, because, my dad wouldn't even go to a race. He called it vehicle
Abuse.
abuse.
Really?
And
Okay.
he wouldn't even go to a race. So I had to kind of learn this whole trade on the fly, so to speak. And Greg saw a lot of things that I did wrong, and I'm glad that he recognized it and picked up on it and didn't commit those errors.
Right.
But that's the price of education, and a lot of guys can refer to it as WJ University.
There you go. Yeah.
And I'm happy to teach anybody almost anything I know.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to hold back some a little bit, right?
Well, yeah, they don't want to load the gun before we shoot you.
And there were commercials, right? The Professor of Pro Stock. You had those Goodwrench commercials for a while in front of the schoolhouse. And that was, think about that. And maybe, unfortunately, part of a slight back step of drag racing, it's like you used to flip on the TV and there would be commercials with Warren Johnson on them.
Right.
And I just thought that was the best as a drag racing fan. It's like, look at this. And you're in a schoolhouse and you're teaching kids, and I think they were probably unruly.
Kids unruly?
Yeah.
Not if I'm around. Well, that was filmed out in California.
You're talking, it makes me think back to when you came to Total Seal to do the AERA event, which, it probably was 6, 7, 8 years ago. It's been a while, right?
Yeah.
You were talking, and you're like you are now, and I'm listening, and I'm like, man, this guy is cut from the same cloth as my father. I think I went over and told you that afterwards. Like, I get you, man. I get you, because y'all are cut from the same cloth. That racer mentality.
It's a little brutal, but it gets the job done.
But that's what it takes, though. It's like you said, there's a race car driver, but there's a racer. My dad was a racer like you. He was going to do whatever it took to make it happen.
Focus.
Yes. And just relentless grinding away. It's like if you go find, I guarantee you, even though it's probably almost about 5 o'clock now, he's still at his shop in the dyno room back there working on go-kart stuff, because he whipped their butt not long ago, but he knows there's a bigger track coming up next time, and he ain't done yet.
He's enjoying life.
He is loving it.
Well, isn't that what it is? Like, you found something that you really like. You wouldn't be able to put that much, like if you were in the welding sling, could you have possibly put that much love and determination into it?
No. When you absolutely enjoy what you love, it's not a job, it's an opportunity.
Yep.
And you will expand your horizon, so to speak, education, whatever, to be successful at it.
Right. Yeah.
Because you don't want to do
something else. No, exactly. I want to do this. So what made you choose Pro Stock? Versus Top Fuel, man. That's the big show, right? Is the fuel cars. That's what
big show?
Here we go. Get him, Warren.
Mechanical masochist using chemistry. No, every vehicle out there has a purpose. It's just naturally aspirated stuff appeal to me. I figure if you got to use a power adder to something, you obviously didn't build the engine right to start with.
Okay, yeah, so we started a whole fight on Instagram not long ago because Keith Duckworth, from Cosworth, entered the DFV, right, the most successful engine in Formula 1 history, said turbochargers are for people who can't build engines.
Absolutely.
And I put it up there because I'm kind of with you. I love NA engines. I'm like, yeah, give me an NA engine, because then there's nothing for free. You got to fight and claw for everything. And there's something about that. Maybe it's masochistic. I don't know, but I love it. Fuel cars are cool to watch. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah. Well, what'd you call them?
I appreciate the numbers
Circus?
They put up on a board. For a friction-driven vehicle, those are pretty remarkable numbers.
Right.
ETs and speeds that they run. But when you got to rebuild it after 3 seconds, I don't think that's a real way to run a railroad.
It's a lot of work too. You see all your work just evaporate like that. That's a bit
redundant
much.
Work is what that is.
Well, it's like short track racing, man. It's fun, man, but you got to fix your race car every single week because you're going to tear your stuff up. Ain't no about that. Yeah. So I can get some of this drag racing thing now, but I can start to catch on. It's like, wait, I worked on this. I can just keep kind of massaging the same thing.
Depends on your definition of fun.
Right, I guess so.
So the last time we had you in, we got to a point where we started talking about some of the valve train issues, and that's where you had said that just so many challenges lie, and you said, but I solved it. but then NHRA wouldn't let you do it, right? And that was just the pneumatic valve train, and that just sparked with me, and I just got to thinking about like how many other things were there that Warren had gone down the road, and then someone was at the end of the road saying, no, don't go here, sir. The pneumatic valve train for Pro Stock. We spoke earlier about fuel injection, and Roy Johnson was saying that they should have gone to fuel injection 5-10 years before they did, and I said that you had been mentioning it since the early 1990s, when
1989 to be exact.
And that's when kart and all the other major forms of auto racing were like making their transition, and the OEs were making their transition, and you were right on it then. Why?
I had done a development job. Kurt and I did a development job for Kickoff Marine for their offshore shore race program, 500 cubic inches, whatnot, and they were making, I think, about 775 horsepower at the time, but they couldn't turn it over 7,500. And when the prop comes out of the water, bad things happen.
Yep.
So they called me and asked me if I could help them, and I said, well, I can sure give it a try. And they asked me what kind of power a 500 cubic inch fuel injected EFI engine, unlimited compression ratio, should make. I said, 1,000 horsepower easily. About 40 seconds later, he picks the phone up again, and, are you sure? I said, yeah. Our first hit on it was 985 horsepower before we even got to tune it up, because Kurt and I had not the foggiest idea about EFI.
Right.
And a guy from DFI kind of walked us through the thing to get it, and by the end of the day, we had, I think, 1035 or something like that.
Right.
They put it in the boat, reset the record by 20 miles an hour, and outlawed the engine on the spot.
Wow. Outlawed the engine on the spot.
Yeah, so that's, my definition of a boat is a hole in the water. You throw money into it. That cured me there.
Wow.
We talk about raising that bar and getting pistoled, and like Roy said earlier, that was it, right? You pushed it too far.
There it is.
Oh, yeah.
Stop.
yeah, killed it.
But that's where you thought, hey, we should do this in drag racing. How were you programming? Like nowadays, it's so easy with the you're just on the computer. But back then in 1988, computers weren't.
Basically the same.
Okay.
A little slower, but basically the same. You dealt in 250 RPM blocks, and you still control all 8 injectors and whatnot. And you looked at the O2s and mapped it. They responded a lot slower, so you had to kind of lead it by about 400 RPM all the time. So, but it was basically the same thing. And it's nothing really earth-shattering. Today's ECUs are so much faster, and they got rid of a lot of the junk as far as the Pro Stock ECU. We don't need the heated and air conditioning seats or power windows or convertible top operating. So it's pretty simple. It's
straightforward. Yeah.
Just does what we need.
Yeah.
So what about other, crazy Warren Johnson concepts that some rule maker said, dude, no?
I did looking for RPM, I did a twin cam engine.
Okay, here we go.
But the camshafts were in the block.
Okay.
The lifters were in the cylinder head. Pusher rod was about 1.25 inches long.
Okay.
Run about 14,000 RPM on a Spintron. I don't know, they outlawed that for some reason.
Yeah. and that was going to be for...
Because it was a push rod. It was still technically a push rod engine.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Kind of like the IndyCar engine that Elmore did, right?
Yep.
One run, done. Yep. Outlawed after one race. Cause
see, that's the kind of stuff that makes, for me, interesting.
Oh, God, I have it. When I got to go visit Elmore in the UK a couple years ago, they had one of those engines on display in the lobby. Man, I got a selfie next to it because I love that. That's me. I'm like, yes, that's cool. That's racing.
Total innovation, right? Which is something that has unfortunately been
think outside the box,
outlawed and lost.
Crush it.
Rocker arm on one end, the finger follower on the other, and against the camshaft.
That's cool.
It was nice.
Okay, where is that? Do you still have that?
That engine?
Yeah.
No, we scrapped it.
That would be so cool to see right now.
It was just a regular block. We just machined everything out and made an insert on the side.
Right, yeah. We just put a couple of cams in there. It's lovely. It's no big deal. Right.
So, all right. So Hartford tells me this story back related to this machine that you and Kurt would in 1 week digitized, machined, and dynoed 5 sets of cylinder heads? Like back to back.
There may have been some changes just on one set of cylinder heads. May have been 2 or 3 changes to one, but we've run a lot of parts across the dyno.
Or you could literally with a machine like this, you could go in there and say, hey, I can take this head, I can dyno it, I can go make a change on that head, put it back on the engine and re-dyno it, and basically do all that in a day.
The beauty of the software that we have in the Rottler is the fact that I can go change any part of the porting operation, intake, exhaust chambers, just change one part of it, not have to change the whole thing. So if we see, we'll take a look at the piston, we'll look at the coloring on it. Don't have the right activity over here. Let's go change that over there.
Right.
So if I got to do a little welding, that takes a little time out of it. But we can make changes pretty rapidly. We can have them off the engine, machine, and back on in 2.5 hours.
Wow. Right. 2.5 hours. That's pretty impressive.
You got to do what you got to do.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
If you don't do it, somebody's going to do it to you.
Well, and to that point, I think about the people that you raced against during what many consider the golden era of pro stock. The 1980s when I started to become a conscious person. The Bob Glidden's out there, Ray Morrison's out there, so many, and you guys were in a development race away from the track. Like that's what they say about Bob is that they worked themselves. I don't want to say to death, but they worked all the time. And you had to keep up with them. You had to be doing the same thing, like running through manifolds, running through cylinder heads. What was that experience like, knowing that you're going to the track to beat these guys, they're trying to beat you, you're trying to earn a living, and the only way to do it was to just work, develop, and problem solve?
Yeah, well, that's why I took a more of an analytical approach to it than probably most of the people. It saved a lot of work because I was already short enough the way I was, so let's not endanger myself. So we do a lot of thinking, and we kept impeccable records of what we did. And so it kind of gave us a leg up on a lot of people that did the shotgun method of development, where they just kept blasting away until they hit something that was better.
Well, that
end result is that we all got to the same place. Some just took longer to get there.
Well, keeping the methodical records, that's really important, because if you don't really document what you did, your mind will fill in blanks that didn't exist.
Yeah, it'll lie to you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, you got to go back and know, okay, this is the change I made. I documented this, and this is what it was. And because otherwise, if you just rely on your own memory, like I said, it'll lie to you.
Oh yeah,
big time.
Well, we talk about it a fairly amount of time on hidden horsepower, and like a concept that isn't ready because of the technology of the time. Like sometimes you have to double back to it. Like it didn't work then, and you went down a road and you got to a dead end and it didn't work. But now there's all these different materials, process, etc., which all of a sudden that dream you had in, say, 1985 couldn't work then. Maybe in 1995 it can work. Maybe in 2005 it can work.
Oh, you're absolutely correct. You make one significant change, but there's all this periphery stuff that has an effect on it. So that's where the thinking comes in, of where this didn't work the way I thought it was going to work. So first of all, you grab a mirror and you can find out where the problem's at. You just look at yourself and what the hell was I thinking? And then you go back and work your way back through it, and you can eventually, and there's a lot of times that there's no way you went out on that branch so far and it's going to break off. But you'll find out to a certain extent, okay, this didn't work because this component over here wasn't in sync with it. You have to realize this whole thing is a combination. All we're talking about is an air pump, and you got to get everything in sync for it to be correct, or maximum efficiency.
Right. And sometimes there's an accident. Like Roy Johnson was here earlier. I don't know if you were able to watch or listen, but I asked him just very curiously about their dominance at Bandimere Speedway, because they had such great cars up there. And Alan had, now I know, he lied to me. Right? Okay, now I know.
Really?
Alan, you lied.
Shocked.
No. You
got to watch him, Mopar guys.
Sure. Yeah, you know that better than anybody, by the way. Great part of the book, by the way. Anyway, it was an accident. It was a happy accident that he figured out that they needed to like overgear on the mountain, and he's like, oops, look at us. And they went out and won like 4 in a row. Anything like that happen with you ever? Happy accident? Stumble upon something that turned out to be great?
Nothing of any great significance. I really can't say of anything that all of a sudden one of those aha moments.
Sure.
Nah, I really can't recall any of it like that. But to Roy's benefit, he was at least aware of where they were, and the accident got him there, but he understood where he was, and okay, that change got us here. I have to give him credit for that.
Yes.
Right. So I think it's the unintended consequences is what you're saying. So I got this part designed.
I didn't
right?
mean to pull the trigger.
Yeah. It's like I intended this to happen, and I did that. I made that change, but the unintended consequence over here is what actually made it a negative in the end. So what are some of you have any unintended consequences that just stick in your mind? Like, oh God, that was a lesson that I learned the hard way, and I'll never forget it. That you can share?
Nothing of real significance. I mean, we made a lot of chassis changes that produced negative results, but back then you have to remember that was in the 90s. We didn't have all this shock technology that we have nowadays. Basically, we had a Coney electric shock, and that was it. You couldn't even revalve the thing yourself. So if you made any changes on the suspension that affected that shock negatively, it could be pretty drastic.
Yeah. And you don't want to have that going when you're going down the track. That's probably not a good thing.
Well, it makes it interesting once in a while.
I wonder, and people who watch pro stock, and they don't have fire coming out. They don't make 11,000 horsepower. But to me, it's like all these different racers out there battling for 2 or 3 horsepower. The effort that goes in, I just don't think the average person or fan understands or could possibly conceive of the effort that goes in. So, like, for instance, carburetors. You ran with carburetors all those years as much as you wanted to change the fuel injection. They didn't do it, and probably a mistake. I think everybody admits now. It would be interesting to see where we were. But the effort in getting the right carburetors, like, it's not just we go buy a carburetor or 2 carburetors. Like, how many carburetors did you go through to find the right carburetors? Why were they right compared to the one that's on the table?
Well, we didn't buy a lot of carburetors. We'd start with a basic Holley product and made a lot of modifications to them. And sometimes they were a gain, sometimes it was a negative, but you learned all the time. And that was the interesting part. You could make a carburetor do as crude as a carburetor is. I mean, it's like a globe valve on the dash. You kind of open up and it's supposed to flow some fuel in the engine. The carburetor is always behind times for the fuel requirements. That's why you have to run it over rich. Because by the time the signal gets there, the engine's another 100 RPM higher, 200 RPM, who knows what. So it's always behind times. So you're trying to coerce this mechanical contraption into
closing that gap.
And I guarantee we weren't the only shop that was making all kinds of unusual parts and pieces. There's enough carburetor gurus out there that made a lot of stuff, and I'd look at some of it and dismiss the majority of it. And it was a very interesting time, but the fuel injection part of it, and that was the reason I was a proponent for fuel injection, is the fact that we could keep that engine out of trace detonation basically all the time.
Right.
And detonation is where all the problems start.
Yeah, it's not good.
If you maximize a carbureted engine on the dyno, camshaft, header, whatever you're working on, you'll put 35 hard pulls on it. You'll pull the thing apart, guarantee you're going to put 8 top rings in it, maybe pistons, maybe rods if you knock the pin bores out around. No, we take them apart at 100 pulls, pull them apart, put the same parts back in it, including the rods, the aluminum rods, and put another 100 pulls on it. Engine life has gone up. I originally estimated it probably 30 to 40%. No, it's gone up 300 or 400%.
Wow, that's massive.
Yeah. Oh, it's just unbelievable.
Right, it really is. It's kind of hard to even kind of really comprehend that. It's like you just throw that number out like that. It's like, wait, that's That's orders of magnitude, right?
Yeah, it's not detonating, so it's not trying to kill itself. And that's where you have to run the carburetors, because you have to run them over rich. And if you ever got behind the 8 ball, trouble in River City.
Yeah, no doubt.
But think of all the money that could have been saved.
Oh, they could have cured the national debt.
No, I think this is great. And when did you design the DRCE engine? Because I find it to be interesting that is still the standard. And there's multiple versions, and some that I talk to, the 2, the 3, the 4, and people have their preferences. But your design is still the standard in NHRA Pro Stock now, and it doesn't seem to be like that's it, the final evolution.
I designed the first one in 1983. That was the DRCE 1, and that was done in such a rapid fashion that the quality of the castings was not what you see today by any stretch of the imagination. So I redesigned the cylinder head in 89, 90, somewhere around there. It was the 2 head, but it was on a 4840 bore space. And at that point in time, probably about 85 or 86, we started working with Caterpillar to pour the compacted graphite blocks.
Oh yeah, compacted graphite, big deal.
I spent about a summer up at Peoria, Illinois at Caterpillar. And that's still a block of preference right now because the material was so good.
Right.
Well, I redesigned the 3, which technically it's a far superior block, but GM bean counters decided to go over to another facility to have them cast, and the material is so bad in there you can't get the thing to seal. You can fix it by sleeving it and whatnot, but you're just still putting bandages on it. But RPM wise, the 3 is really the engine if you want to run RPM.
Okay. I mean, it's funny you said that about the CG being different in different places, and Andy Rotler mentioned that earlier, is that just because it's a material doesn't mean it's all the same.
Nope.
At all. We saw some things at Gibbs between where the GM compacted graphite stuff came from for NASCAR versus the Toyota compacted graphite. There were just differences in those engines and how they honed and things like that. And so I think, that's kind of a path. Talk about that development in metallurgy and what that's meant to that 300 or 400% increase. I know some of that's, like I said, EFI, but how much of the role do you think that material technology is?
We're still using the original 3 blocks because, like I said, technically they're a superior piece. Mm-hmm. But a lot of them got sleeves in them. All 8 cylinders are sleeved in it, and you just learn to work around it because RPM-wise, you can make it work significantly better than the 2 block. Even the 4 block is another a stillborn engine from GM. Whoever got involved in the design of that should not be drawing air anymore.
So talk about graphite. So why did CG? What makes CG better than gray cast iron for what you do?
It's basically a form of ductile iron where it's got a lot more elongation in it. You can get it in some cases harder than the conventional gray iron blocks. Ductile iron, the carbon particles, graphite, are spherical, little ball bearings running every place. CG looks like a bunch of little hot dogs in there with round ends on it.
Right.
And the CG blocks, they've got a certain time period that they have to be poured in, otherwise that starts to separate.
Okay.
The metallurgy starts to change, and the 3 blocks where they were poured was barely above a horseshoe foundry.
Wow.
Well, I know Caterpillar did the work for Dodge on the NASCAR blocks when they came in. I remember at Melling, we got the first block in. The ship from address was Caterpillar up in Peoria.
Yeah,
that's who
they understood CG because they were willing to work on that because they had such a problem with the inline 6 Caterpillar. If you crack one of them, you got to replace the whole head. Cummins had 3 2-cylinder heads on it. So you break one of them, you just replace a third of it.
Right.
And they were looking for a better material, and they figured, racers, they can break a cannonball with a rubber hammer in a sandbox. So let's
play
see
this
if
game.
they can ruin this thing. And I guess it was an education for them at the same time, and they were more interested in perfecting the pouring of the CG material.
Right.
And that's what kind of made the 2-block the favorite for such a long time. It had been around for a long time, and there was a plentiful supply of them.
Was it the first compacted graphite block in like professional racing?
If you're talking about just drag racing,
Probably for certainly for drag racing. What year was that?
CG, the first one, it was about 86 or 7, somewhere in that era.
I would think that probably predates some NASCAR stuff too. Then probably.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I'd had NASCAR shops calling Kurt trying to figure out how to hone this stuff.
Oh yeah. About a dozen years later.
Oh, exactly. And why was the 4 stillborn? Like, so here you are, you're designing, and I'm thinking.
No, I didn't have any input on the 4.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's everything that could be done wrong on it, they did. Let's put it that way.
Oh, well, here.
Although they went to Granger and Worrell in England, and they got good material, so that's the only saving grace of it.
But in the perfect world, the 3 with good material would be
the block of choice.
Would be the block of choice.
Have Granger and Worrell pour the 3, and you're good.
Yep, absolutely.
Wow.
Because they're really good at it. I mean, that's kind of their expertise.
One of the best in the world. All the stuff I've seen from them.
So down that same path of material technology, talk about coatings. What role has coatings played in engine development?
Well, that's a question relating to that is probably the most common question I got. How fast can these cars go? How quick can they go? I said, there's only 2 factors that determine that. This and material. That's it.
Yeah.
Now, we were probably one of the leading teams to investigate a lot of strange materials. But there was gains to be made if you had the right material for the application. A lot of people say, "Oh, titanium, that's the magic material." No, titanium has got its place. Magnesium has had its place. I mean, there's the right material for the application is what you need.
Right, exactly. Back to the thinking through what you're doing and
what is this material supposed to accomplish? What is it going to do better than what I've been using for 40 years?
Yeah.
The unobtainium aspect of it, but everybody talking about one thing I would like to add to that and get your opinion is like dollars, right? Like how much is someone willing to put forth so that you can use your mind to find these incredible materials,
dump trucks full of money,
right? Like that's a huge number, I would imagine.
Getting materials, it's not. Well, we've had some strategic materials simply from the fact I have clearance to get it, and it's common nowadays, but in reality it wasn't that much more expensive. I mean, as they change alloys, whatnot, any aluminum alloys basically are pretty much the same.
Yeah, the material cost isn't dramatic. It's the research and development cost to figure out
and then some of them you get into the machining cost. Oh my God, we've had some materials. Trying to figure out how to machine it was almost impossible, but we muddled our way through it. But there's just because you change materials, it's not going to be magic. It's going to help if it's applied right, but then you got the machining process that there's something to do.
Yet another learning curve.
We've had to work with companies to get cutter inserts to machine some of this stuff because conventional inserts just won't even touch it.
Right.
So
and
it's an education.
Right. Well, CG, right? So like you said, the people were calling Kurt, how do I hone this stuff? Because CG hones completely different than gray cast iron.
Yep.
And so where did you go when you were trying to find the next material? You know, with aerospace, we're calling NASA, or you're going to kind of like that detective work of where to find the next element. Like there had to be some effort put in there, or did people approach you?
You don't have to buy all that material in this country. You know, there's a whole world out there that makes materials.
So, but to find those people though, like that, you know, while you're racing, like, are you hunting down, or people approaching you, like, hey, we got something that could work?
I've had a certain amount of that, and because I'm always interested in looking at different things, but you kind of have to have an idea. Okay, this particular material is not doing what I think a better material should do or could do. So what encompasses a different material? That's what you got to find the right people for that.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Well, I know, just a little side story, when we were doing some of the oil development that you guys actually helped us do testing with, I would go to this, they call it the Society of Tribologists and Lubrication Engineers annual conference. And I would sit in on all these presentations. Like every 30 minutes was a different presentation, all day long for 3 days. And I would go find different ones, and I would listen, because I knew from a material perspective what I wanted, but I didn't know where I'd find it. So I would just go listen and listen and listen. And every once in a while you'd bet, oh wait, this guy's talking about a material or a property that I'm looking for. So I would wait for the room clear out, and then go give him a business card and say, this is who I am, who I work for, what I'm trying to do. Can I get some of this stuff? You know, some of that stuff actually made it into the oils we tested.
Yeah, some of that oil you sent over was always labeled CP. I thought that meant crockpot.
It did, yeah, CPO, crockpot oil. You know, because it was back to the super secret, right? We didn't want anybody knowing about it, so we literally had little bitty tiny lab. We could make little bitty batches, and you got to heat it up. So one way I found heat it up is put in a crockpot, which I picked that up from alcohol fuel guys.
Yes.
There's a lot of alcohol dragster guys that will drain their oil and after a pass into a crock pot to get it hot enough to cook off the methanol, and they pour it back in. That's where I picked it up. I'm like, man, I want to go spend, $1,500 on a heated kettle. I can go down to Walmart and buy one for like $39 and get the job done. Now I'm going to Walmart,
You're qualified to make a still now.
Hey,
I like where your head's at.
It's chemistry. I like it,
That's what about these days? I am under the impression you're doing some autocross stuff. What keeps you busy? I know you still have the pro stock. I'm not going to hit you with, when you coming back, Warren? We want to see you back, Warren. We all want to see you back, Warren.
Can't make any money at it anymore.
I know, but what about, come on, that last Atlanta race, we heard you were like thinking about it.
I think about a lot of things. Nah, it doesn't interest me to the level that it did before. And if we did, decide to enter a car, we'd more than likely put Kurt in it. And so we'll play around with it. I got 2 cars. I got one converted over as the EFI format, and we'll probably go someplace and test. And
it would make a lot of people happy.
It
could make a lot of people sad, too.
It could make some people sad, a lot of people happy. I'm sure Kurt would love it, and your fans. Think of all the books you'd sell.
You got to be commercial about everything. Huh?
Yes. Hey, this is America, right?
Capitalist society.
Absolutely. Let's make
at least it still is.
Absolutely. But what about the autocross? Like, you're delving into other things. Like, with your time, you're getting into, what are you getting into?
Well, the autocross thing. I mean, it's NA motor. Kind of attracts me to build something like that. I'm competing against the Lingenfelters and Mast and all these guys, and it's just interesting to me from the standpoint that, okay, how much power can we make that's usable? Mm-hmm. And you have to understand the format that they're racing under and build engine to that. We're not trying to build something that turns 10,000 RPM and makes 1,000 horsepower, because it's totally useless. You got to build something they can drive out there, because I think the fastest straightaway is probably 60 feet.
Oh yeah,
I don't know what it is,
right.
But it's
so a lot of par throttle.
That's the interesting part. They keep asking me for more power, but every time we look at the ECU, they're never past 70% throttle.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So damned if you do and damned if you don't. But it's a fun thing for us, and they're doing well at it. So.
Something else, like I said, another project, another path they go explore, and I'm sure there's probably nowhere near as many rules and regulations around that so far.
Yeah, it's pretty loose as far as rules and regulations. So it's rule books have always fascinated me from the standpoint. It'll tell you what you can't do, but it doesn't tell you what you can do. And there's lines, there's open space between every one of them lines. Mm-hmm. That's open for interpretation.
That's the important part of the rule book, is what's not there.
I never broke a rule. I put a lot of stress fractures in them. But I never blatantly broke a rule.
Yeah. I think that's part of the fun of racing, is getting that rule book and figuring out what you can do that's not there. That's the great part. We did one of the episodes of Hidden Horsepower with Larry Wallace, the NASCAR guy who did the Penske Ford stuff. And to me, I told him one of the greatest compliments was that Gary Nelson said, most of these are yours.
Yes.
You're like, that's what you want. So, okay, if you're tallying up who's the greatest NASCAR engine builder, well, most of those rules got an LW next to it. Well, all right, then that means you did your job.
Got other people to think.
Right.
That's all it was.
Well, talk back to you earlier about the sounds and stuff. That was one of the things that he mentioned, was that before they had a Spintron, they had an engine that they would hook up to run the other engine when it's not firing, and they could hear the valve train.
That was an era that they still had wood spoke wheels in it. No, the Spintron was invented because it was a useful tool. There was other predecessors to that that were very crude, didn't collect a whole lot of information, like you say, just the audible part of it. So that tool evolved into what is a Spintron nowadays. And there's really other tools out there that have come about by wanting to gain more knowledge of what's going on.
Was that one of the more valuable tools, you think, to come along for what you were doing in NA engines?
It's a useful tool. It's
better than your flow bench, right?
I don't even need a flow bench. If you need a flow bench, how in the heck do you get a seatbelt on that flow bench so you can race the thing? I just never...
Well, so back to what Roy was saying earlier, or was it Kazi? I forget what it was. One of them was saying that that they had to learn not to trust the dyno all the time.
Yeah, just like a flow bench. You have to learn, that what I'm getting out of there is not even usable. Just because that thing flows more air, it's not going to make any more power. And you have to figure out what those nuances are.
Yeah. Learn what it's not telling you.
Yeah, because a flow bench, basically, I haven't seen a flow bench that's been built correctly. The only one I ever saw that was correct was a Smokey Unique one.
Okay, yeah, I've heard about that one in his book.
Yeah.
Well, that's appropriate. That Smokey got it right. So, winding down, Pro Stock. We love it. 500 cubic inches now since 1982. It's got this kind of arc. A lot of people thought it was dead a few years ago. The two major teams kind of got together and came up with a way to save it. Now we got 20 cars per race and all. But 650s or so, 210 miles an hour. Has it evolved to its pinnacle? Should they change something? Where's your thought on the class that you spend so much time involved in?
No, they haven't gotten to the pinnacle yet, based off what I've seen. Because in 5 years, 4 years, they're still running at exactly the same speed and ETs going back to a standard correction. So that means they haven't developed any more power at all that's usable. Maybe on their dyno they did, but net result, when you look at that time card, that ain't working. So, based on that, there's still plenty of opportunity out there.
Well, going back to
But you have to think about it.
Right? Because I remember spending some time at Gary's Stinnett shop one night, and his notebooks of correction factor and how detailed he has to be. In fact, one of the things of knowing not what to believe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, look deep in those numbers, not just look at the surface of them. Because I mean, think about it, Dallas, how much it changed from a morning session to the afternoon session. I mean, there was what 300s, 400s.
Yeah, when you're depending on Mother Nature.
Right.
Do you watch the races? Do you like when NHRA's on, Pro Stock is on? Or
we'll
out there
watch them at the shop. I'll turn the TV on while I'm working, and
keep
if
up.
there's something interesting, I'll check it out.
That's good to know.
Yeah,
that's you got to keep up with it, right? Like that's the reason you're here. If it wasn't Pro Stock, what would it have been? If you didn't go down that road, there was another road. There's another something.
Probably been an aeronautical engineer.
Interesting.
Do you watch Formula One at all?
Once in a while. The difference there, they don't count their money, they just weigh it. So we really can't relate to it.
Yeah, exactly.
But as far as the technology and whatnot, and I've had some brushes with them people, it's pretty interesting. It's still something with 4 tires on it.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Like what they did with in the turbo era here with like Mercedes when they split the turbo. That's back to that some of the innovative things. Like that was a really cool idea. It's like,
cool idea.
Split a turbo.
Well, first thing you have to remember, I'm doing it this way. Is that the only way it can be done?
Right. Chance for innovation. It didn't say you couldn't split it.
Yep.
The rules didn't say that. Let's go for it.
Yeah,
you don't know until you try it.
Right.
That was a huge innovation. They dominated with that. What about the space race? Today Captain Kirk went to space, right? I'm sure we've all been kind of enthralled with that. You mentioned aeronautical engineer, like civilians going to space, rockets landing on pads, moving on the water. Like that's all pretty amazing. What is your take on all of that? What's happening?
Well, it's the evolution of people's quest for knowledge, of trying to do different things. I'm not saying all of it is going to be usable. Some of those people that go out in space, they should just keep going, but it's just if we ever get to the point that we don't try something new, what the heck's the sense of being awake even?
I love it.
It's kind of a common thread, isn't it, Joe? All these guys that have accomplished those things, there's a restlessness, right? You just
we accomplished this. Well, damn, if you were really bright, you would accomplish all of that.
Right. And that brings us back to the beginning, not like what to think about, but how to think of a process, how to think, where to go, where to let your mind go.
You have to think in every dimension possible, because you got so many different materials, different applications, what you're trying to accomplish. Is it the right way of trying to accomplish that? There's so many avenues of trying different things, and people, by their very nature, they don't want to pay taxes and they don't want to change either. So, I mean, it's a case that you got to be able, got to want to try something.
Right.
Because doing the same thing every day the same way, God, they got monkeys for that.
Yeah, except for going for Mexican on Tuesday.
That's what I'm thinking.
That's.
Right? Yes.
I didn't say they were monkeys.
So I have a question. So Steve Burns, right, the guy that did VP. So tell us about that evolution, because that's another company that just kind of changed massively with fuel. I feel like fuel has been one of those big changes in racing.
Well, that was Steve was probably the right person at the right time for that. And he would bring his horse trailer over all the way from Texas with all these chemicals in there. And
I've heard of these stories, so go on.
They'd be mixing this stuff up back there, and they'd be pulling the dyno till 6 o'clock in the morning when I got back there the next morning. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they hit a home run, sometimes they had all ground balls. And but that wasn't a question of trying to build a better fuel. And a lot of cases, the VP is a great fuel if you use it for the right application.
Yeah.
But it was so prone to trace detonation. The only people that absolutely loved them were the spark plug manufacturers, because we'd lose the ground strap at least up 6 or 7 plugs every race if you were trying to run her down the edge. So
that's funny. So I heard stories about him, coming around. like literally had like a spacesuit. Because I mean, when you're dealing with tetraethyl lead, like one drop will kill you dead if you touch it. So he would be out there blending this stuff in the trailer with his spacesuit. Like George Bryce was telling me this story, which he'll maybe share tomorrow. Right? He literally walks out there and sees him in this spacesuit, and he's like, I probably shouldn't have seen that, right? He said, no, you don't want to know what's in here.
Oh my God.
Dioxane.
All right, we're going to continue on. This is not it for Warren Johnson. In fact, we're going to have a roundtable discussion. But for this segment, we are concluded. Warren, this has been fantastic. Is there anything we didn't get to that you want to bring up?
No, not that I can think of. You're the ones that are in control of this program.
This guy with questions.
Oh, yeah.
Peppering Warren
We
Johnson
wore
with
him out,
questions,
right?
Throwing in curveballs, fastballs. But it's not over yet because we got a roundtable discussion. John Callies and others. Scooter Brother going to be here. It's going to be great. So stick around, gentlemen. In fact, you can head over to the big roundtable discussion. Warren, thank you so much. This has been tremendous, and thank you for sharing so much. And I recommend everyone get the book available on Amazon.com. It is a bestseller. It's in its second rendition. So many details about Warren's life, things that we couldn't possibly get to here. Just great stuff. Warren, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Warren Johnson with us here at the Engine Performance Expo. More to come.
What a day, what a day, what a day. Yeah, my brain is swollen. I've learned so much today.
They told us, don't start cars. We are not going to listen.